Japan is a country rich in tradition, architecture, crafts, and pop culture. A country that can blend history with the modern high-tech world. For most of my life, many of my interests came from Japan, so after deciding to take up the language, one of the most difficult to learn, I decided to travel to the land of the rising sun, alone, to experience the culture firsthand. About a 5 or 6 minute walk from my hotel was Tokyo Tower, which is a popular landmark in this area. Tokyo Tower is located in the Shibuya area and is a communications and observation tower that resembles the Eiffel Tower. I decided to check it out. This was my first activity since arriving in Tokyo. This 333-meter structure was completed in 1958, designed by architect Tatsu Naito, who was taken influence by the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and it became the tallest tower in the world until 2012, when it was overtaken by Skytree, also in Tokyo. I managed to take a really cool photo where I did a bit of a pose that represented the Tokyo Tower. After that, I had my first ever ramen experience. It was not too bad. After getting lost for about 4 hours, I finally made it to Toyosu to check out Team Lab Planets, which is a modern arts facility that utilizes digital technology while you wander through what looks like an interactive art experience. This was then followed by a night in Asakusa, which offers more of a traditional experience of what Tokyo once was. Having struggled understanding the train network on my first day in Tokyo, I decided to spend my second day getting used to taking trains around the big city. My first destination was Shibuya. Shibuya is one of the busiest areas of Tokyo, housing one of the 2 largest train stations in the world. There were many shops in the district, including this guitar shop, which had 7 floors. There were some really nice guitars. There were many claw machines, capsule machines, and arcade areas. I did not play any of these games, but it was interesting seeing what some of the prizes they had on offer. However, it did start to get old after a while because there were so many. I eventually made my way back to Shibuya Station, even crossing the Shibuya Scramble Crossing. Known as the busiest pedestrian crossing in the world, this led me to the statue of Hachiko, the famous Akita dog who was remembered for his loyalty to his owner. Waiting for him at Shibuya Station from 1925 after his owner's death until his own eventual death around 10 years later. I then jumped back on the train to the next destination, which is Shinjuku, another busy district in Tokyo. I got away from the busy area and decided to check out Shinjuku Gyoen National Garden. This large park area can be viewed for 500 yen, around $5 Australian. It had a large pond, greenhouse, and many trees, including ume, which are plum trees, which at the time I thought they were early blooming sakura, cherry blossom trees. This was inside the greenhouse. I enjoyed my time at the garden. It was a peaceful atmosphere, and I took my time walking around the whole garden. These trees were very popular amongst tourists. A lot of people were taking photos next to them. Next I had a bento box for lunch. After eating lunch, I returned to the train station. The next destination being Akihabara. Akihabara is another major shopping district and is the epicenter of shops that sell anything electronic and pop culture. Already up to this point, I had seen so many claw machines that sell the most ridiculous prizes, from soft toys to figurines, real-looking AK-47s and chicken nugget keyrings. Nearly every shop in Akihabara had at least one section that had claw machines or an arcade game section. There were also so many capsule machines where you could try your luck at receiving small collectible toys. I did not attempt either a claw machine or a capsule machine. I was just happy to look around. There were shops that sold all kinds of pop culture figurines, such as Pokemon, Dragon Ball, One Piece, Naruto, Godzilla, Ultraman, Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, Sailor Moon. The list goes on. There were so many. There were also anime and manga shops, but my favourite were the old retro video game shops that sold Famicom games, Super Famicom, Neo Geo. I even saw a 3DO console. I also saw games for the PCFX, which was only released in Japan. I quite enjoyed my time here. I then returned to the hotel, feeling satisfied with what I accomplished for the day. I spent the remainder of the night relaxing and watching a bit of Japanese TV. Today, I planned on visiting Yokohama, which is in the Kanagawa prefecture. This was my challenge for today. However, along the way, I decided to visit Tokyo Imperial Palace. The Imperial Palace is located on the former site of Edo Castle. The site is now a large garden surrounded by moats and large walls that once guarded Edo Castle. Edo is the former name of Tokyo and was the period between 1603 and 1868. The moment I entered the garden, it became evident that I had come to Japan way too soon in the spring. There was also a small room that had a small-scale model of what was once Edo Castle. The castle was built in 1457, however was sadly burnt down in 1863. This image was comparing the sizes of both Himeji Castle and Matsumoto Castle. I can imagine the real thing would have been impressive to look at. After I had a decent look around the garden, I then headed for the exit and then made my way to Tokyo Station. The journey south to Yokohama was simple enough, only taking approximately 30 minutes to reach Yokohama Station. With 3.8 million people, Yokohama is the second largest city in the country, in between Tokyo and Osaka. This is a huge train station, the 5th busiest in the world. It also had a shopping centre inside, including a Pokemon Centre, so I decided to check that out first. There are plenty of Pokemon Centres around Japan, but this is the only one I visited. As I was walking towards Yokohama Landmark Tower, I saw the Nissan Global headquarters to my left. I knew that the headquarters was in Yokohama, but I was still quite surprised to see it on my way to Landmark Tower. I went inside to see a museum that had a variety of cars, from the classics to the futuristic concept cars that we would never ever see on the road. It did not take long to notice two skylines. There was a blue GTR and a 400R. I quickly went inside both of them. This is not some place I expected to see, but I'm glad I did. I had a great time. After having a good look around, I continued on to the harbour area, Minato Marai Nijuichi, meaning harbour of the future. There was a Japanese museum ship that was built in 1930 and was used as a training vessel at the beginning of World War II. The closed Cosmo World amusement park was another main attraction of the harbour, with its 100-metre tall Ferris wheel, which is formerly the world's tallest Ferris wheel from 1989 to 1992. Another place that was closed at the time was Yokohama Museum of Art, which was temporarily closed for renovation, so I was not having much luck with my time in Japan. But what was thankfully open was the Yokohama Air Cabin, so I decided to go for a ride. The Yokohama Landmark Tower is a 70-story high tower with a shopping mall below, which I decided to check out for a little bit. The shop that mostly interested me was the Lego shop, which has some Japanese themed stuff, including a Japanese garden and a Himeji Castle. Began my 2-kilometer hike to Osenbashi Wharf. Osenbashi Wharf is not only a passenger terminal for cruise ships, but it's also a great place to walk around and experience the amazing views from the end of the pier. From this point, it started to get dark, and I only had about 10% battery life left on my phone which I needed to help get me back to the hotel, so I started to head back. There were other interesting attractions in Yokohama, such as Chinatown and the Cup Noodle Museum, so maybe I'll return to Yokohama one day for a future holiday. I did enjoy my time in Yokohama very much. Today's location is Kawagoe, in the Saitama Prefecture, north of Tokyo. This journey was going to be slightly more difficult compared to Yokohama. It would take slightly more time to get there. I thought this would be great practice for when I eventually have to travel to Gunma Prefecture for my next hotel. I also took my first bus in Japan. It was not required, but it was going to save me some time. Kawagoe is an Edo period castle town, and it also has the nickname Little Edo because of its traditional atmosphere. There were some temples and shrines in the area, which I checked some of them out. At this chopstick shop, I bought some chopsticks for 3,000 yen, which works out to be about 30 Australian dollars. Perhaps the town's main landmark building is the bell tower called Toki no Kane. When you look up photos of Kawagoe, this is the building you usually see. While in Japan, I wanted to try some food that is local to the towns or prefectures that I visit. This is what I tried in Kawagoe. Potato chips made from thin slices of sweet potato. I was really enjoying the traditional atmosphere, which is why I decided to visit this town. It was now time to head back to Tokyo. Tokyo Skytree is a broadcasting and observation tower. From the moment it was built, it has been the tallest tower in the world ever since. Ascending the top deck was my next activity of the night.
Next up is the Tokyo Skytree Temple Deck, floor 350.
The Skytree can be a bit expensive, so it's not for everyone. However, if you would like the highest view of Tokyo possible, it is the Skytree that is going to provide that. Today is my last day in Tokyo. The last couple of days I've been travelling to other prefectures. However, on my final day, I wanted to check out the remaining places I wanted to see in Tokyo. First was the Tokyo Dome. The Tokyo Dome is not only the home ground for the baseball team, the Yomiuri Giants, but it's also a major venue for concerts and other sports. My association with the Dome is with pro wrestling, with New Japan Pro Wrestling hosting the annual Wrestle Kingdom every 4th of January. The roof is an air-supported structure that gives it an egg-looking appearance. But what also makes the venue interesting is that it is next to its own amusement park with a Ferris wheel and a tower that drops riders from 80 meters in the air. There's also a hotel, shops, spa. I spent a fair bit of time here. However, I had to move on to the next place, in Ginza, where I had reserved a ticket to see a kabuki show. Kabuki is a traditional Japanese theatre that has been around for about 400 years. Unfortunately, cameras were not allowed during this act. Before the show, I had my own personal tour guide who explained a lot about kabuki to me. All the actors are men, including those who play female character. In this act, there were actors who were played by a lineage of men in their families. She showed me the cast, and there were a couple of families who had 3 generations performing together. Children would practice with their fathers and grandfathers until when they become an adult and their sons would fill in their old role. I also learned why actors wear white face paint. It is because back hundreds of years ago, they did not have the sophisticated lighting that we have today, and the rooms were generally quite dark, and the only lighting they had were some small skylights and candles. The white face paint made it easier for the audience to see their facial expressions. After having a look around the museum, I then decided to check out the Ginza area of Tokyo, which is a luxury high-end shopping district. Next, I took the Yokohama train, which is a driverless train, which took me to the next destination, Odaiba. Odaiba is a shopping and entertainment district that sits on an artificial island in Tokyo Bay. The main attraction in Odaiba is perhaps the Rainbow Bridge that can be seen from the beach itself. For dinner, I had takoyaki, octopus dumplings. I stayed in Odaiba for a while, late enough to see it during the night. This concludes my 6 days in Tokyo. Today was the day that I had to travel 150 kilometers north of Tokyo to the Gunma prefecture, where I would stay 2 nights at a ryokan, which is a traditional Japanese inn, near the stone steps at the onsen resort, Ikaho. Upon arriving on the foot of Mount Helena, I got off the bus when I should have stayed on until we reached the bottom of the Ikaho stone steps. Now I had to hike the bloody mountain through ice and snow with my luggage and backpack. At least I received a warm greeting from the Gunma mascot, Gunma-chan. It took me 40 minutes to hike from the foot of the mountain to the bottom of the Ikaho stone steps. When I arrived, I was the only foreigner in amongst all the happy tourists, looking completely lost while dragging my suitcase around. Here I am, climbing all 365 steps, multiple times, checking the side streets, checking the town map, checking my phone for the hotel name. It took me another 40 minutes to find the ryokan. The name of the ryokan is Fukuichi. Let's take a quick tour. The main lobby had a piano, as well as a tea and coffee area. There was also a shop that sold food and souvenirs. This is a public tea room. plenty of manga that you could read. And also nice views of the mountains. Now I was able to check out the town like a regular person. The first shop that I entered had everything in the theme of Gunma-chan. I also wanted to check out the local food in the area, including this. There was a small footbath. There were amusement park style games where you can win prizes. There were games such as shooting targets with a rifle, throwing darts at a dartboard, and even games of ring toss. I can imagine that this would have been good for kids if families decided to spend a holiday in Ikaho. There are 365 steps that lead to a shrine. The ryokan that I stayed at offered yukatas for people to wear. And then it was time to have dinner. At the ryokan, there were private dining rooms where you can sit alone and eat in peace. There was some sort of pork thing, and I put egg in it. Inside here was that. Soup, I think. There was that stuff. Fish. And a bit of rice. I'm not sure what half of this is. Actually, I don't know what most of this is. This is why I wouldn't make a good YouTube blogger. After staying here longer than I should have, someone came in and eventually kicked me out. Then I decided to check out the town during the night. There were two places that I wanted to visit during my stay in Gunma Prefecture, Ikaho and Kusatsu. Since I was already staying at ryokan in Ikaho, all I had to do was take a bus into Kusatsu. Kusatsu, just like Ikaho, is an onsen resort and is possibly the most popular place for tourists in the Gunma Prefecture. Its main attraction is the Yubatake, the hot water field, which is said to gush out more than 4,000 litres of hot spring water every minute. There was a shrine at the top of these steps. I then had a look around the shops and restaurants. You can buy and eat an egg that had been boiling inside onsen water. I tried bee pollen ice cream and it was delicious. For lunch, I had Joshu steak, which is Wagyu beef from the Gunma prefecture. Later in the night, I had another private dinner. There was, I think, shrimp. In here there was some meat and other stuff. There's fish and that stuff. There's shrimp, I think. Yeah, it would be. Tempura. And more under here, I think. Yep, it is. And I had rice, soup, a spot of tea. Finally, for dessert, I had fruit. This is the halfway point of my holiday. My schedule involved spending 8 nights in the Kanto region, and then follow that with 8 nights in the Kansai region. To achieve this, it would take many hours, so I decided to stay at a hotel in Hamamatsu, using a fast mode of transport. I took 2 buses and 3 trains, with 2 of them being Shinkansen, bullet trains. While looking at the prices for the first and second class for each train, I saw that the first Shinkansen was the only train that offered grand class, so I thought, why not? This was by far the most comfortable commute I've ever had, no matter what mode of transportation. For this particular journey from Shibuya to Tokyo would cost $94 for second class, $125 for first class, and $137 for grand class. This Hakutaka Shinkansen, the White Hawk, was travelling at 260 km an hour. The soft leather seats were comfortable. The armrests had adjustable tables that can pull out in front of you. The seats reclined and you didn't have to worry about the people behind. And there was so much legroom. While this was certainly a fast train, the Hikari train that I took next is capable of travelling 285 km an hour. But with that train, there was a problem. Approximately 50 minutes into that journey, the ticket said that I would arrive at the station within 10 minutes. This seems strange because judging by where we were at the time, it did not seem possible for the train to arrive at Hamamatsu station in 10 minutes. We had yet to stop at Shizuoka station. It turned out, when looking at my physical ticket, the travel agent booked for me to get off at Shizuoka station instead of Hamamatsu. I had to take a regular train for the rest of the journey. At last, I had finally made it to Hamamatsu after 11 hours and 6 different transports. I stayed one night at the Okura Act City Hotel. I were to be spending the rest of the night in this hotel room since everywhere was already closed by the time I arrived. I decided to check out the hotel's observation room, the highest point in the city. Hamamatsu is famous for craftsmanship with companies such as Honda with the cars and bikes, Roland keyboards, Shigeru Kawai pianos. In fact, Hamamatsu is a town of music. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to check any of it out. I arrived at the train station early to sort out this ticket issue. I did manage to check out some musical instruments, such as a piano and a guitar. My ticket had me going from Shizuoka station to Kyoto, however I was able to get on at Hamamatsu. The journey to Kyoto would take approximately an hour and 40 minutes. I would be spending 3 nights at Hotel Grassery. Let's have a quick look at this hotel. The cool thing about this hotel is that it sits in the middle of Nishiki Market. The first place I decided to head to was Nintendo Kyoto. Kyoto is a home of Nintendo, being founded in 1889 by the Yamauchi family. The first 3 presidents had been 3 different generations of the Yamauchi family until 2002, when Satoru Iwata took over from Hiroshi Yamauchi. Nintendo started off making Hanafure cards, which is a traditional Japanese card game. I enjoy playing this. Nintendo got into the video game market with the Color TV game console, only released in Japan in 1977, and then the Game & Watch handheld game and alarm clock from 1980. But it wasn't until the success of the Famicom 3 years later that Nintendo eventually was able to work its way over to the West with the Nintendo Entertainment System, with that being able to completely revive the North American market, a few years after the video game crash in 1983. Since then, Nintendo has been one of the ongoing largest video game companies in the world, with the current home system being the hybrid Nintendo Switch. Nishiki Market had a lively atmosphere to it, the shops were interesting, and the food seemed to have food that I would enjoy. Kyoto is famous for maintaining its sense of old Japanese culture and tradition, so I decided to spend the night visiting some of these locations. The first was Gion. Gion is Kyoto's geisha district. It is a nice place to see a more traditional atmosphere during the night. However, it was the next destination where I spent more time, Fushimi Inari Taisha. This is an important Shinto shrine in southern Kyoto. Its attraction is the thousands of vermilion Shinto torii gates, which are those archways that are often found near a shrine. Fushimi Inari... Hello. One of the most important kami or god of Shinto is the fox, known as Inari or Kami. The god of foxes, rice, fertility, and general prosperity for success is found and worshipped throughout this place. So I checked out the map and was on my way. This is a popular place for tourists during the daytime, however I decided to check it out during the night. The endless tunnels of torii gates that were slightly lit by lamps guiding your way through a sacred pilgrimage felt kind of eerie, especially when hearing owls calling out in the distance. I was glad to be here during the night. This felt like an adventure, as I was entering and exiting tunnels of torii gates only to discover mini shrines in between, including shrines that were made up of dozens of mini torii gates. It was interesting to see. While recording a video of my progress, I managed to completely trip over a step while entering a tunnel. Luckily, I wasn't hurt. After nearly an hour of hiking to the summit, I decided to turn back and head back to the entrance. Although I did not make it to the top, I was still satisfied with what I had done. I just wanted to check out other locations before the night was done. The final place I visited was Kyoto Station. Other than Kyoto Tower, there isn't much to do here during the daytime. However, during the night, there is the Graphical Illuminations Plus at Kyoto Station, where 15,000 LED lights illuminate most of the 171 steps on the large staircase inside the station building. This was originally created in 2012 to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the opening of Kyoto Station building back in 1997. It is still operating today with some upgrades. It was beginning to get late, so I decided to take the underground subway back to my hotel. Today I wanted to check out more of what Kyoto had to offer during the daytime. I began by checking out the Nintendo Global Headquarters, which is close to the hotel. I knew that this wasn't a place for tourists. All I could do was look at both buildings from the outside. And then I waited about half an hour for what happened to be just a 1-minute journey by train. I should have just walked. The first place is Toji Temple. Before the Heian period, which ended in the year 794, the capital of Japan was Nara. Following the Nara period was the transfer of the capital city from Nara to Heiankyo, which was the previous name for Kyoto. 2 large guardian temples were built in the imperial city, with a temple being built both on the east and west sides of the main entrance. Unfortunately, the west temple no longer exists, but the east temple, Toji Temple, has survived to the present day, which is now a popular tourist destination. There is also a 5-story pagoda, which is the tallest pagoda in Japan at 55 meters. My favorite spot here was nearby the Hyotan Pond. It was a great place to take photos and videos. And then it was time to move on to the next destination, which was in Arashiyama. There were many temples to see around here, but the first place I visited was a bamboo grove. This is a forest of naturally growing bamboo, and it is perhaps the most popular tourist destination in the area. There were several pathways that run through various parts of the forest. The thousands of bamboo stalks can reach around 50 meters in height, which is an iconic spectacle in Kyoto. As expected, this place was bustling throughout the forest, and even some empty tracks that were reserved for rickshaws to travel through, such as this one.
I guess we're not going to actually go through the process. It's all blocked up.
There were other temples within walking distance, so I naturally made my way over to the next one, Jojakoji. Compared to the other temples in the area, this one offered a much more peaceful, tranquil environment, because there was not many people around. There was some construction going on in the area, so I was unable to reach some of the areas. I could see the 12-meter tall 2-story pagoda in the distance, but unfortunately the pathway was blocked off. The next temple I visited was Tenryuji, meaning Temple of the Heavenly Dragon, with the use of the kanji characters for heaven and dragon. The dragon has been a good omen in Japanese culture for many years. This temple was built in 1339 and was the head temple of the Tenryuji branch of Rinzai Zen Buddhism. I enjoyed walking around the Sogenchi garden, which had this lake that looked great with the view of the main hall next to it. There were some nice pathways with steps that overlooked the main hall. The next place I checked out was the Kimono Forest. Kimono Forest is a collection of 2-meter tall pillars with kimonos displayed inside them. From what I have seen, this place looks great during the evening when each of the kimono cylinders illuminate in the night. The 600 pillars surrounding the laneway to the Randen tram station ground has 32 types of kimono designs. I walked through the winding path that leads to the Dragon Pond, a pool of water filled with coins thrown in by visitors for the purpose of making a wish. I did not spend too much time at the station, nor did I take the train. The next stop, Kinkaku-ji Temple. This is another popular place for tourists. This gold-colored temple was built in 1397 as a retirement villa of the shogun Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, and according to his will, it became a Zen temple after his death. This temple was burnt down in 1950 and was rebuilt 5 years later, which probably explains why it doesn't look so old. Similar to Tenryuji Temple, this has a walking path. Out of all the temples that I visited today in Kyoto, this was my favorite. Because I managed to see a fair bit of Kyoto so far, I decided to check out the Shiga prefecture, more particularly Hikone town, which is a small castle town with a population of just 100,000 residents. It is located to the east of the largest freshwater lake in Japan, Lake Biwa. The main attraction of this town is Hikone Castle, but before heading there, I wanted to check out Yume Castle Road, which had some shops and restaurants. I was quick to find Hikone, the town mascot cat, who wears a red and yellow samurai helmet. I saw him everywhere, including this cafe where I had matcha tea and matcha ice cream. After that, it was time to check out the castle. I bought a combo ticket for the castle, garden, and museum. There was a bit of a climb to get to the castle. Hikone Castle was built 400 years ago and it took around 20 years to build. Compared to other castles in Japan, Hikone's is quite small, only being 3 stories high. Despite having around 200 castles in Japan today, only 12 of them are considered original castles that survived the Meiji Restoration, in which 2,000 castles were dismantled. Hikone Castle was spared by request of the emperor himself. I always had an interest in seeing the castles, so this was really cool for me. And then it was time to check out the Genkyo-en garden. Today, I headed to my final hotel in Osaka. I arrived early because I had a big day ahead of me. The hotel I was staying at was only a 5-minute walk to Osaka-jo Hall, and about 15-minute walk to Osaka Castle. After 2 weeks of experiencing cold weather, icy winds, and some snow on the ground, the weather was finally warm. There were many street food stalls, busy with bustling crowds of cheerful people. Although Osaka Castle is not considered one of the 12 original castles in Japan, it is still a very large, impressive looking castle. Although it was built in 1583, the keep that we see today was rebuilt in 1931. It was difficult to get a bad view of the castle, especially when there's a pond right there. This is a very popular photo spot. The main reason why I arrived early was because I had to make it to Kobe by 1 o'clock. Kobe is the largest city in the Hyogo prefecture. I had arranged to meet with my friend Saki, who I'd met in Melbourne. She had since returned to Japan, so it was a good chance to catch up again. And we had some Kobe beef for lunch. After that, we went for a walk to Kobe Harbourland. Kobe Harbourland is fairly new, only being opened in 1992, and certainly has a modern feel to it. Possibly the main attraction of this area is Kobe Port Tower, and it turned out that we had arrived during a festival where they were celebrating 60 years of the tower. This place reminded me a bit of the waterfronts in Australia, and was probably the most cheerful atmosphere that I had experienced in Japan. It was at this point where Saki and I had to go our separate ways, with me remaining in Harbourland until later in the night because I wanted to see the fireworks. I had to wait a few hours for night to come, so I took my time checking out the rest of the area. The fireworks were scheduled to start at 7 o'clock. It was now time to head back to Osaka and check in at my hotel. I had yet to eat dinner, so I decided to head out and check out Dotonbori. The lively food, bar and entertainment area of Dotonbori is possibly Osaka's most recognizable destination. The name Dotonbori refers to the canal and street under the same name. Osaka is considered the food capital of Japan, and Dotonbori is the heart of that scene. One of the most prominent attractions is the illuminated billboard for the Osaka-based confectionery company, Glico, which displays an image of a runner crossing the finish line with his arms up in the air. Glico Man has been on display since 1935. I was looking for something to eat, and there was a wide variety of food, from meat skewers, gyoza, takoyaki, and konomiyaki, and I decided to get this gyoza. I quite enjoyed it. It was a big day, so it was time for bed. Nara Park is a park area in the central part of the Nara Prefecture, and is the destination for many of Nara's main attractions, and one of them being hundreds of freely roaming deer, shika. In Japan, deer are considered messengers of the gods and have been considered sacred. Not only do they roam around in the park areas, but also on busy streets and nearby cafes and shops. The deer are wild, but they do enjoy eating crackers called shika senbai. This is where a peaceful moment can quickly turn into chaos, as the moment they acknowledge that you have food, as multiple deer could possibly follow you and sometimes even bump you from behind. I have seen videos on the internet where tourists get chased by half a dozen deer at the same time. I was prepared for the insanity, however, that's not what I got.
No. Okay. Now.
I'm not sure why. Maybe it was because it was raining at the time.
No. Uh-oh.
Sometimes they politely bow to you before taking the cracker out of your hands. I headed north to the next destination, Todaiji Temple. This temple is more than 1,200 years old and is the home to many national and cultural assets. One of the most important assets is this 15-meter tall Great Buddha, Daibutsu. I spent the first part of my morning checking out a single food tent that had two stalls inside it. The stall on the left had a grill that cooked skewers. I tried the Wagyu beef skewer, and then I checked out the stall on the right that sold ten-yen pan, which is a pancake-like batter poured into a griddle that is in the design of a large 10-yen coin. Usually they add mozzarella cheese inside, however I decided on chocolate. And then I decided to head to Denden Town. This is Osaka's version of Akihabara. The first shop that I checked out had pop culture figurines. Upstairs in one of the shops had a whole floor dedicated to manga, which is a Japanese style comic. My favourites were the retro game shops. There was Super Famicom, which is what the Super Nintendo was. Famicom, which was the original Nintendo Entertainment System. I found a lot of the prices to be reasonable, but there were also some rarer games that can easily cost into the hundreds or even thousands of dollars. There were also game consoles such as the original PlayStation, Neo Geo, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, Sega CD, Neo Geo CD, the Panasonic version of the 3DO. There were trading card shops. I found another retro game shop. The Famicom. Nintendo Virtual Boy. There's a good collection of Game & Watch. The CD Engine Core Graphics, the Atari 2800. You don't see any of this stuff in Australia. To be honest, I prefer Denden Town over Akihabara. It had more shops that interested me, and it had less arcade places and claw machines. Denden Town was next to Shinsekai, which had many restaurants, which I just happened to buy Family Mart fried chicken. In the center of Shinsekai, there is the 100-meter tall Tenkaku Tower, which has a 90-meter high observation deck. The crazy signage above the restaurants makes this area feel like a small version of Dotonbori. I couldn't decide on what to do for the day, so I just repeated what I did the previous day. I was back in Denden Town. The thought of seeing any WonderSwan games never came to mind. There was some really old Sega stuff, some Mark III, which was the Master System, and even older than that with the SG-1000. This is really cool to see. The Famicom Disk System, which was a floppy disk add-on for the original Famicom. I had booked a ticket online for Team Lab Botanical Garden, which is an outdoor version of the Team Lab planets that I saw in Tokyo. And just like many other times while in Japan, I realized that I arrived a month too early. This sculpture was designed to incorporate the movement of birds when they fly around, creating a magical light show. From my understanding, I saw no birds. I didn't think that Team Lab Botanical Garden was as good as the Toyosu one, but it was cheaper. On the way back to the hotel, I quickly stopped by Osaka Castle to take a few night shots. This spot was the main reason why I came. This was a very impressive castle to look at, but it wasn't the best. The last city I visited during my stay in Japan was Himeji. Himeji is located in the Hyogo Prefecture, to the west of Kobe, and the city's most famous landmark is Himeji Castle, Himeji-jo. This six-story castle was built in 1333 with the original name Himeyama Castle until 1581. It has been expanded a few times over the centuries, with the main keep we see today being built in 1609. I pre-booked an early Shinkansen to avoid the early queues. The surrounding curtain walls of the castle were equipped with 21 gates and gatehouses to protect the entrance of the main keep. While the previous two castles I visited, Hikone and Osaka, had a few gates, including the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, this one truly felt like a maze that was designed to prevent attackers from rushing directly into the castle itself. Today, this is the largest castle in Japan, and many consider this to be the best. Advanced defensive systems were developed for warfare, which included nearly 1,000 firing holes, but was never attacked during those early centuries. Himeji Castle has survived all kinds of hazards, from earthquakes, one as recent as 1995, typhoons, and only receiving little damage from World War II air raids in 1945, with one bomb hitting the castle but failing to explode. This castle has survived everything. This felt like an adventure into what the Shogun era of Japan was once like. It was now time to check out the interior of the main keep, but before entering, we had to take off our shoes and carry them around in a plastic bag. The windows had vertical bars to deflect any incoming enemy arrows. The ceilings had beams that were lower than my head, and the staircases had the steepest steps that I have ever climbed, and the openings into the upper level were so small that I had to be careful not to hit my head. This was all by design, of course, making it difficult for the enemies to invade the castle. From this window, you can see Himeji Station from a distance. There were so many weapon racks for guns and spears. There was a small museum that I was able to check out. These shachihoko ornaments represented fish in the sea, and they were used as a charm to ward off any disasters. These were the attires that the Sakai lords were wearing. And these attires were what the foot soldiers wore. It started to rain at this point, so to avoid the rain, I decided to have lunch where the shops and restaurants were located, near the front entrance of the castle. For lunch I had tempura on rice and orange juice. Out of all the 18 days I stayed in Japan, today had the worst rain. However, it didn't stop me from visiting Kokoen Garden. This was located to the west of the castle's main gate. This is a traditional Japanese-style garden that was constructed in 1992 on the former site of the feudal lord's residence. This was the kind of day that I needed to finish off my first ever holiday in Japan. And now, it was time to prepare for my return to Melbourne.